Hello and welcome to this new video. In this video, we're going to cover some important practice question answers for SC-900, which is Microsoft Security Compliance and Identity Fundamental Certification exam. So before going to the question answers, we request you to kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're not already a subscriber. Let's jump on to the questions. Question number 1. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: all Azure Active Directory license editions include the same features. You can manage an Azure Active Directory tenant by using the Azure portal. You must deploy Azure virtual machines to host an Azure Active Directory tenant. So the right answers are, so the first statement is false, the second statement is true, and the third statement is false. So Microsoft Azure Active Directory is a comprehensive identity and access management cloud solution that combines core directory services, applications access management, and advanced identity protection. Azure Active Directory comes in 4 editions: free, Office 365 apps, Premium P1 and Premium P2. The free edition is included with the subscription of a commercial online service, example Azure Dynamics 365, Intune, and Power Platform. Question number 2. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Dash provides best practices from Microsoft employees, partners, and customers, including tools and guidance to assist in an Azure deployment. And you have 4 options: Azure Blueprints, Azure Policy, the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure, a resource log. So the right answer is the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. The Cloud Adoption Framework is a collection of documentation, implementation guidance, best practices, and tools that are proven guidance from Microsoft designed to accelerate your cloud adoption journey. Question number 3. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So dash is used to identify, hold, and export electronic information that might be used in an investigation. And you have 4 options: customer logbox, data loss prevention DLP, e-discovery, a resource log. So the right answer is option e-discovery. So electronic discovery or e-discovery is the process of identifying and delivering electronic information that can be used as evidence in legal cases. You can use e-discovery tools in Microsoft Purview to search for content in Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 Groups, and Yammer Teams. You can search mailboxes and sites in the e-discovery search and then export the search results. You can use Microsoft Purview e-discovery cases to identify, hold, and export content found in mailboxes and sites. If your organization has an Office 365 E5 or Microsoft 365 E5 subscription, you can further manage, custodian, and analyze content by using the feature-rich Microsoft Purview e-discovery solution in Microsoft 365. Question number 4. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. You can manage Microsoft Intune by using the, and you have 4 options: Azure Active Directory Admin Center, Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, Microsoft 365 Defender Portal, Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So the right answer is Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So the Endpoint Manager combines services you may know and already be using, including Microsoft Intune, Configuration Manager, Desktop Analytics, Co-Management, and Windows Autopilot. These services are part of the Microsoft 365 stack to help secure access, protect data, respond to risk, and manage risk. Question number 5. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Federation is used to establish dash between organizations. And you have four options: multi-factor authentication, MFA, a trust relationship, user account synchronization, a VPN connection. So the right answer is a trust relationship. So federation is a collection of domains that have established trust. The level of trust may vary, but typically includes authentication and almost always include authorization. A typical federation might include a number of organizations that have established trust for shared access to a set of resources. Question number 6. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: applying system updates increases an organization's secure score in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The secure score in Microsoft Defender for Cloud can evaluate resources across multiple Azure subscriptions. Enabling multi-factor authentication increases an organization's secure score in Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So the right answers are all the statements are true. System updates reduces security vulnerabilities and provide a more stable environment for end users. Not applying updates leaves unpatched vulnerabilities and results in environments that are susceptible to attacks. If you only use a password to authenticate a user, it leaves an attack vector open. With MFA enabled, your accounts are more secure. Question number 7. Which score measures an organization's progress in completing actions that help reduce risk associated to data protection and regularity standards? And we have four options. Option A, Microsoft Secure Score. Option B, Productivity Score. Option C, Secure Score in Azure Security Center. And option D, Compliance Score. So the right answer is option D, Compliance Score. So Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager is a feature in the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal that helps you manage your organization compliance requirements with greater ease and convenience. Compliance Manager can help you throughput your compliance journey from taking inventory of your data protection risks to managing the complexities of implementing controls, staying current with regulations and certifications, and reporting to auditors. Question number 8. What do you use to provide real-time integration between Azure Sentinel and another security source? And you have four options. Option A, Azure AD Connect. Option B, a log analytics workspace. Option C, Azure Information Protection. And option D, a connector. So the right answer is option D, a connector. To onboard Azure Sentinel, you first need to connect your security sources. Azure Sentinel comes with a number of connectors for Microsoft solutions, including Microsoft 365 Defender solution and Microsoft 365 sources, including Office 365, Azure AD, Microsoft Defender for Identity, and Microsoft Cloud App Security, etc. Question number 9. Which Microsoft portal provides information about how Microsoft Cloud Services compile with regulatory standard, such as International Organization for Standardization, ISO? And you have four options. Option A, the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. Option B, the Azure Cost Management Plus Billing. Option C, Microsoft Service Trust Portal. And option D, the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. So the right answer is option C, Microsoft Service Trust Portal. The Microsoft Service Trust Portal contains details about Microsoft implementation of controls and processes that protects our cloud services and the customer data therein, provides a wealth of security implementations and design information with the goal of making it easier for you to meet regulatory compliance objectives by understanding how Microsoft Cloud Services keep your data secure. Question number 10. In the shared responsibility model for an Azure deployment, what is Microsoft solely responsible for managing? And you have four options. Option A, the management of mobile devices. Option B, the permissions for the user data stored in Azure. Option C, the creation and management of user accounts. And option D, the management of the physical hardware. So the right answer is option D, the management of the physical hardware. So there's a diagram showing responsibility zones. Question number 11. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: verify explicitly is one of the guiding principle of zero trust. Assume breach is one of the guiding principle of zero trust. And the zero trust security model assumes that a firewall secures the internal network from external threats. So let's see the answers. So the first two statements are true and the third statement is false. So zero trust is a security strategy. It is not a product or service, but an approach in designing and implementing the following set of security principles: verify explicitly, use least privilege access, assume breach. So this is the core of zero trust. Instead of believing everything behind the corporate firewall is safe, the zero trust model assumes breach and verifies each request as though it originated from an uncontrolled network, regardless of where the request originates or what resources it accesses. The zero trust model teaches us to never trust, always verify. Question number 12. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Control is a key privacy principle of Microsoft. Transparency is a key privacy principle of Microsoft. Shared responsibility is a key privacy principle of Microsoft. So the right answers are, so the first two statements are true and the third statement is false. So the six privacy principles of Microsoft are: so number one, control. We will put you in control of your privacy with easy to use tools and clear choices. And number two, transparency. We will be transparent about data collection and use so you can make informed decisions. Number three, security. We will protect the data you entrust to us through strong security and encryption. Number four, strong legal protections. We will respect your local privacy laws and fight for legal protection of your privacy as a fundamental human right. Number five, no content-based targeting. We will not use your email, chat files, or other personal content to target ads to you. And number six, benefits to you. When we do collect data, we will use it to benefit you and to make your experience better. Question number 13. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Dash a file makes the data in the file readable and usable to viewers that have the appropriate key. And you have four options: archiving, compressing, deduplicating, encrypting. So the right answer is encrypting. So encryption is the process of encoding information. This process converts the original representation of the information known as plain text into an alternative form known as ciphertext. Ideally, only authorized parties can decipher a ciphertext back to plain text and access the original information. Question number 14. For each of the following statement, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: digitally signing a document requires a private key. Verifying the authenticity of a digitally signed document requires the public key of the signer. Verifying the authenticity of a digitally signed document requires the private key of the signer. So the right answers are, so the first statement is true, the second statement is true, and the third statement is false. So a certificate is required that provides a private and a public key, and the public key is used to validate the private key that is associated with the digital signature. So as the private key is only used by the signer to sign the document, and the associated public key is used to verify the authenticity. Question number 15. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. When users sign in to the Azure portal, they are first, and you have four options: assigned permissions, authenticated, authorized, resolved. So the right answer is authenticated. Authentication is who you say you are, and authorization is what permissions to do you have. Question number 16. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Dash is the process of identifying whether a signed in user can access a specific resource. And the options are authentication, authorization, federation, and single sign-on. So the right answer is authorization. So legitimacy of a user is checked first, authentication. Later, the permissions rules are checked to give him authorization to work on resources. Question number 17. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Dash enables collaboration with business partners from external organizations such as suppliers, partners, and vendors. External users appear as a guest users in the directory. And you have four options: Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS, Active Directory Forest Trusts, Azure Active Directory Business to Business, B2B, Azure Active Directory Business to Consumer, B2C. So the right answer is Azure Active Directory Business to Business, B2B. So Azure Active Directory Business to Business collaboration is a feature within external identities that lets you invite guest users to collaborate with your organization. With B2B collaboration, you can securely share your company's applications and services with guest users from any other organization while maintaining control over your own corporate data. Question number 18. In the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure, which two phases are addressed before the ready phase? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. So each correct selection is worth 1 point. And you have five options. Option A, plan. Option B, manage. Option C, adopt. Option D, govern. And option E, define strategy. So the right answers are option A, plan, and option E, define strategy. So the cloud adoption framework brings together cloud adoption best practices from Microsoft employees, partners, and customers. The framework provides tools, guidance, and narratives. The tools it includes helps you shape your technology, business, and people strategies to achieve the best business outcomes possible through your cloud adoption effort. Cloud adoption framework is strategy, plan, ready, adopt, govern, and manage. Question number 19. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: in software as a service, applying service packs to applications is the responsibility of the organization. In infrastructure as a service, managing the physical network is the responsibility of the cloud provider. In all Azure cloud deployment types, managing the security of information and data is the responsibility of the organization. So the right answers are, so the first statement is false and the second and third statements are true. So for all cloud deployment types, you own your data and identities. You are responsible for protecting the security of your data and identities, on-premises resources, and the cloud components you control. Question number 20. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Azure AD Connect can be used to implement hybrid identity. Hybrid identity requires the implementation of two Microsoft 365 tenants. Authentication of hybrid identifiers requires the synchronization of Active Directory domain services and Azure Active Directory. So the right answers are, so the first statement is true, and the second statement is false, and the third statement is true. So hybrid identity uses accounts that originate in an on-premises ADDS and have a copy in the Azure AD tenant of Microsoft 365 subscription. Most changes, with the exception of specific account attributes, only flow one way. Changes that you make to ADDS user accounts are synchronized to their copy in Azure AD. Azure AD Connect provides the ongoing account synchronization. It runs on an on-premises server, checks for the changes in the ADDS, and forwards those changes to Azure AD. Azure AD Connect provides the ability to filter which accounts are synchronized and whether to synchronize a hashed version of user passwords known as password hash synchronization. When you implement hybrid in identity, your on-premises ADDS is the authoritative source for account information. This means that you perform administration tasks mostly on premises, which are then synchronized to Azure AD. Question number 21. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So Dash provides benchmark recommendations and guidance for protecting Azure services. And you have four options: Azure Application Insights, Azure Network Watcher, Log Analytics Workspaces, and Security Baselines for Azure. So the right answer is Security Baselines for Azure. The Azure Security Benchmark provides recommendations on how you can secure your cloud solutions on Azure. The content is grouped by the security controls defined by the Azure Security Benchmark and the related guidance applicable to cloud services. When a feature has relevant Azure policy definitions, they are listed in this baseline. To help you measure compliance to the Azure Security Benchmark, controls and recommendations, some recommendations may require a paid Microsoft Defender plan to enable certain security scenarios? Question number 22. What is an example of encryption at rest? And you have four options. Option A, encrypting communication by using a site-to-site VPN. Option B, encrypting a virtual machine disk. Option C, accessing a website by using an encrypted HTTPS connection. Option D, sending an encrypted email. So the right answer is option B, encrypting a virtual machine disk. So encryption is the secure encoding of data used to protect confidentiality of data. The encryption at rest design in Azure use symmetric encryption to encrypt and decrypt large amount of data quickly according to a simple conceptual model. A symmetric encryption key is used to encrypt data as it is written to storage. The same encryption key is used to decrypt that data as it is read for use in memory. Data may be partitioned and different keys may be used for each partition. Keys must be stored in a secure location with identity-based access control and audit policies. Data encryption keys which are stored outside of secure locations are encrypted with a key encryption key kept in a secure location. Question number 23. Which three statements accurately describe the guiding principles of zero trust? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. So each correct selection is worth 1 point. And you have five options. Option A, define the perimeter by physical locations. Option B, use identity as the primary security boundary. Option C, always verify the permissions of a user explicitly. Option D, always assume that the user system can be breached. And option E, use the network as the primary security boundary. So the right answer is option B, C, and option D. So zero trust is a security strategy. It is not a product or a service, but an approach in designing and implementing the following set of security principles. Verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach. Question number 24. Which service should you use to view your Azure Secure Score? To answer, select the appropriate services in the answer area. So the right answer area is Security Center. So Defender for Cloud displays your SEC score prominently in the portal. It's the first main tile, the Defender for Cloud overview page. Selecting this tile takes you to the dedicated secure score page where you will see the score broken down by subscription. Select a single subscription to see the detailed list of prioritized recommendations and the potential impact that remediating them will have on the subscription score. Question number 25. You are evaluating the compliance score in Compliance Manager. Match the compliance score action subcategories to the appropriate actions. To answer, drag the appropriate action subcategory from the column on the left to its actions on the right. Each action subcategory may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Each correct match is worth 1 point. So action subcategories are corrective, detective, preventative. So let's see the right answers are. So preventative for encrypt data at rest, detective perform a system access audit, corrective makes configuration changes in responsive to a security incident. So preventative actions address specific risks For example, protecting information at rest using encryption is a preventative action against attacks and breaches. Separation of duties is a preventative action to manage conflict of interest and guard against fraud. And detective actions actively monitor systems to identify irregular conditions or behaviors that represents risk or that can be used to detect intrusions or breaches. Examples include system access auditing and privileged administrative actions. Regulatory compliance audits are a type of detective actions used to find process issues. Corrective actions try to keep the adverse effects of a security incident to a minimum, take corrective actions to reduce the immediate effect, and reverse the damage if possible. Privacy incident response is a corrective action to limit damage and restore systems to an operational state breach after a breach. Question number 26. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Compliance Manager can be directly accessed from the, and you have four options: Microsoft 365 Admin Center, Microsoft 365 Defender Portal, Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, and Microsoft Support Portal. So the right answer is Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. So sign into Compliance Manager. To go to the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal and sign in with your Microsoft 365 Global Administrator account, select Compliance Manager on the left navigation pane. You will arrive at a Compliance Manager dashboard. The direct link to access Compliance Manager is, so my note, Microsoft 365 Compliance is now called Microsoft Purview and the solutions within the compliance area have been rebranded. Question number 37. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: enabling multi-factor authentication increases the Microsoft Secure score. A higher Microsoft Secure score means a lower identified risk level in the Microsoft 365 tenant. Microsoft Secure Score measures progress in completing actions based on controls that includes key regulations and standards for data protection and governance. So the right answers are, so first statement is true, second statement is true, and the third statement is false. So Microsoft Secure Score is a measurement of an organization's security posture with a higher number indicating more recommended actions taken. Following the secure score recommendations can protect your organization from threats from a centralized dashboard in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. Organizations can monitor and work on the security of their Microsoft 365 identities, apps, and devices. Secure scores help organizations report on the current state of the organization's security posture, improve their security posture by providing discoverability, visibility, guidance, and control, compare with benchmarks, and establish key performance indicators. Question number 28. What can you use to provide a user with a 2-hour window to complete an administrative task in Azure? And you have four options. Option A, Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. Option B, Azure Multi-Factor Authentication. Option C, Azure Active Directory Identity Protection. And option D, Conditional Access Policies. So the right answer is option A, Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. So PIM is a service in Azure Active Directory that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. So privileged identity management provides time-based and approval-based role activation to mitigate the risk of excessive, unnecessary, or misused access permissions on resources that you can care about. Question number 29. In a hybrid identity model, what can you use to sync identities between Active Directory domain services and Azure Active Directory? And you have four options. Option A, Active Directory Federation Service. Option B, Microsoft Sentinel. Option C, Azure AD Connect. And option D, Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. So the right answer is option C, Azure AD Connect. Azure Active Directory Domain Services, part of Microsoft Entra, enables you to use managed domain services such as Windows Domain, Join, Group Policy, LDAP, and Kerberos authentication without having to deploy, manage, or patch domain controllers. Azure AD Connect Health for Sync requires Azure AD Connect Sync v2. If you are still using AAD Connect v1, you must upgrade to the latest version. AAD Connect v1 is retired on August 31st, 2022. Azure AD Connect Health for Sync will no longer work with AADC Connect v1 in December 2022. Question number 30. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: you can create custom roles in Azure Active Directory. Global Administrator is a role in Azure Active Directory. An Azure Active Directory user can be assigned only one role. So the right answers are, so the first two statements are true and the third statement is false. So Azure AD supports custom roles. Global Administrator has access to all administrative features in Azure Active Directory, and Azure Active Directory users can be assigned multiple roles. Question number 31. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: Azure Active Directory is deployed to an on-premises environment. Azure Active Directory is provided as a part of Microsoft 365 subscription. Azure Active Directory is an identity and access management service. So the right answers are: the first statement is true and the second and third statements are false. So Azure Active Directory is a cloud-based user identity and authentication service. Microsoft 365 uses Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is included with your Microsoft 365 subscription. Azure Active Directory is a cloud-based user identity and authentication service. Question number 32. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. With Windows Hello for Business, a user's biometric data used for authentication, and you have four options, is stored to an external device, or is stored on a local device only, or is stored in Azure Active Directory, is replicated to all the devices designated by the user. So the right answer is stored on a local device only. So Windows Hello for Business replaces passwords with strong two-factor authentication on devices. These authentication consist of a type of user credential that is tied to a device and uses a biometric opt-in. So Windows stores biometric data that is used to implement Windows Hello securely on the local device only. The biometric data doesn't roam and is never sent to external devices or servers. Because Windows Hello only stores biometric information data on the device, there's no single collection point an attacker can compromise to steal biometric data. Question number 33. What is the purpose of Azure Active Directory password protection? And you have four options. Option A, to control how often users must change their password. Option B, to identify devices to which users can sign in without using multi-factor authentication. Option C, to encrypt a password by using globally recognized encryption standards. Option D, to prevent users from using specific words in their passwords. So the right answer is option D, to prevent users from using specific words in their password. So Azure AD password protection detects and blocks known weak passwords and their variants, and can also block additional weak terms that are specific to your organization. With Azure AD password protection, default global banned password lists are automatically applied to all users in an Azure AD tenant. To support your own business and security needs, you can define entries in a custom banned password list. Question number 34. Which Azure Active Directory feature can you use to evaluate group memberships and automatically remove users that no longer require membership in a group? And you have four options. Option A, access reviews. Option B, managed identities. Option C, conditional access policies. And option D, Azure AD identity protection. So the right answer is option A, access reviews. So Microsoft Entra Access Reviews enable organizations to efficiently manage group membership, access to enterprise applications, and role assignments. Users' access can be reviewed on a regular basis to make sure only the right people have continued access. Question number 35. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So Dash requires additional verification, such as the verification code sent to a mobile phone. And you have four options: multi-factor authentication, pass-through authentication, password write-back, single sign-on. So the right answer is multi-factor authentication, MFA. So Azure AD multi-factor authentication works by requiring two or more of the following authentication methods. Something you know, typically a password; something you have, such as trusted device that's not easily duplicated, like a phone or a hardware key; something you are, biometric, like a fingerprint or face scan. Question number 36. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: conditional access policies can use the device state as a signal. Conditional access policies apply before first factor authentication is complete. Conditional access policies can trigger multi-factor authentication MFA if a user attempts to access a specific applications. So the right answers are: the first statement is true, the second statement is false, and the third statement is true. So conditional access brings signals together to make decisions and enforce organizational policies. Azure AD conditional access is at the heart of the new identity-driven control plane. So conditional access policies are enforced after first factor authentication is completed. Conditional access isn't intended to be an organizational first line of defense for scenarios like denial of service attacks, but it can use signals from these events to determine access. So users attempting to access specific applications can trigger different conditional access policies. Question number 37. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So Dash is a cloud-based solution that leverages on-premises Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats. And you have four options: Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, Microsoft Defender for endpoint, and Microsoft Defender for Identity and Microsoft Defender for Office 365. So the right answer is Microsoft Defender for Identity. So Microsoft Defender for Identity is a cloud-based security solution that leverages your on-premises Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious inside actions directed to your organization. Defender for Identity enable SecOps analysts and security professionals struggling to detect advanced attacks in hybrid environments. So to monitor users' entity behavior and activities with learning-based analytics, protect user identities and credentials stored in Active Directory, identify and investigate suspicious user activities and advanced attacks throughout the kill chain, provide clear incident information on a simple timeline for fast triage. Question number 38. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Microsoft Defender for Identity can identify advanced threats from dash signals. And you have three options: Azure Active Directory, Azure AD Connect, and on-premises Active Directory domain services. So the right answer is on-premises Active Directory domain services, ADDS. So Microsoft Defender for Identity is a cloud-based security solution that leverages your on-premises Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. Question number 39. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Azure Active Directory is dash used for authentication and authorization. And you have four options: an extended detection and response system, an identity provider, a management group, a security information and event management system. So the right answer is an identity provider. So Azure Active Directory, a part of Microsoft Entra, is an enterprise identity service that provides single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and conditional access to guard against 99.9% of cybersecurity attacks. Question number 40. Which Azure Active Directory feature can you use to provide just-in-time access to manage Azure resources? And you have four options. Option A, conditional access policies. Option B, Azure AD identity protection. Option C, Azure AD privileged identity management. Option D, authentication method policies. So the right answer is option C, Azure AD privileged identity management, PIM. So Azure AD privileged identity management helps you manage privileged administrative roles across Azure AD, Azure resources, and other Microsoft Online services. So PIM provides solutions like just-in-time access, request approval workflows, and fully integrated access reviews so you can identify, uncover, and prevent malicious activities of privileged roles in real time. Question number 41. Which three authentication methods can be used by Azure multi-factor authentication? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So you have five options. Option A, text message, SMS. Option B, Microsoft Authenticator app. Option C, email verification. Option D, phone call. And option E, security question. So the right answer is option A, text message. Option B, Microsoft Authenticator app. And option D, phone call. So Azure AD multi-factor authentication adds additional security over only using a password. When a user signs in, the user can be prompted for additional forms of authentication, such as to respond to a push notification, enter a code from a software or hardware token, or respond to a SMS or phone call. Question number 42. Which Microsoft 365 feature can you use to restrict communication and the sharing of information between members of two departments at your organization? And you have four options. Option A, sensitivity label policies. Option B, customer logbox. Option C, information barriers. And option D, privileged access management, PAM. So the right answer is option C, information barriers. Microsoft Purview Information Barriers is a compliance solution that allows you to restrict two-way communication and collaboration between groups and users in Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Often used in highly regulated industries, IB can help to avoid conflicts of interest and safeguard internal information between users and organizational areas. Question number 43. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: conditional access policies always enforce the use of multi-factor authentication (MFA). Conditional access policies can be used to block access to an application based on the location of the user. Conditional access policies only affect users who have Azure Active Directory joint devices. So the right answers are, so the first statement is false, the second statement is true, and the third statement is false. So conditional access brings signals together to make decisions and enforce organizational policies. Azure AD conditional access is at the heart of the new identity-driven control plan. Many organizations have common access concerns that conditional access policies can help with, such as requiring multi-factor authentication for users with administrative roles, requiring multi-factor authentication for Azure management tasks, blocking sign-ins for users attempting to use legacy authentication protocols, requiring trusted locations for Azure AD multi-factor authentication registration, blocking or granting access from specific locations, blocking risky sign-in behaviors, requiring organizational managed devices for safe specific applications. Question number 44. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: conditional access policies can be applied to global administrators. Conditional access policies are evaluated before a user is authenticated. Conditional access policies can use a device platform such as Android or iOS as a signal. So the right answers are: the first statement is true, the second statement is false, and the third statement is true. So conditional access policies can be applied to all users. Conditional access policies are applied after first factor authentication is completed, and users with devices of specific platforms are marked with a specific state can be used when enforcing conditional access policies. Question number 45. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Applications registered in Azure Active Directory are associated automatically to a, and you have four options: guest account, managed identity, service principal, user account. So the right answer is service principal. So when an application is given permission to access resources in a tenant, a service principal object is created. When you register an application using the Azure portal, a service principal is created automatically. You can also create service principal objects in a tenant using Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, Microsoft Graph, and other tools. Question number 46. Which three authentication methods does Windows allow for business support? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. And you have 5 options. Option A, fingerprint. Option B, facial recognition. Option C, PIN. Option D, email verification. And option E, security question. So the right answer is option A, fingerprint, and option B, facial recognition, and option C, PIN. So authentication begins when the user dismisses the lock screen, which triggers Win Logon to show the Windows Hello for Business credential provider. The user provides their window hello gesture, PIN or biometrics. The credential provider packages these credentials and returns them to WinLogon. So WinLogon passes the collected credentials to ISASS or LSASS passes the collected credentials to the Cloud Authentication Security Support Provider, referred to as the Cloud AP provider. Question number 47. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. When you enable security defaults in Azure Active Directory, Dash will be enabled for all Azure AD users. And you have 3 options: Azure AD Identity Protection, Azure AD Privileged Identity Management (PIM), and Multi-Factor Authentication (MFA). So the right answer is Multi-Factor Authentication (MFA). So security defaults make it easier to help protect your organization from these identity related attacks, which pre-configured security settings. So requiring all users to register for Azure AD multi-factor authentication, requiring administrators to do multi-factor authentication, requiring users to do multi-factor authentication when necessary, blocking legacy authentication protocols, protecting privileged activities like access to the Azure portal. Question number 48. You have an Azure subscription. You need to implement approval-based, time-bound role activation. What should you use? And you have 4 options. Option A, Windows Hello for Business. Option B, Azure Active Directory Identity Protection. Option C, Access Reviews in Azure Active Directory. Option D, Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. So the right answer is option D, Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. So privileged identity management provides time-based and approval-based role activation to mitigate the risk of excessive, unnecessary, or misused access permissions on resources that you care about. Question number 49. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: global administrators are exempt from conditional access policies. A conditional access policy can add users to Azure Active Directory roles. Conditional access policies can force the use of multi-factor authentication to access cloud apps. So the right answers are: the first 2 statements are false and the third statement is true. So accounts that are assigned administrative rights are targeted by attackers. Requiring multi-factor authentication on those accounts is an easy way to reduce the risk of those accounts being compromised. Question number 50. When security defaults are enabled for an Azure Active Directory tenant, which 2 requirements are enforced? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. And you have 5 options. Option A, all users must authenticate from a registered device. Option B, administrator must always use Azure multi-factor authentication. Option C, Azure multi-factor authentication registration is required for all users. Option D, all users must authenticate by using passwordless sign-in. Option E, all users must authenticate by using Windows Hello. The right answer is option B and option C. So security defaults make it easy to protect your organization with the following pre-configured security settings. So requiring all users to register to Azure AD multi-factor authentication, requiring administrators to do multi-factor authentication, blocking legacy authentication protocols, requiring users to do multi-factor authentication when necessary, and protecting privileged activities like access to the Azure portal. Question number 51. Which three tasks can be performed by using Azure Active Directory Identity Protection? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. And you have 5 options. Option A, configure external access for partner organizations. Option B, export risk detection to third-party utilities. Option C, automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks. Option D, investigate risks that relate to user authentication. Option E, create and automatically assign sensitivity labels to data. So the right answer is option C, D, and option E. So to protect your users, you can configure risk-based policies in Azure Active Directory that automatically respond to risky behaviors. Azure AD identity protection policies can automatically block a sign-in attempt or require additional actions such as require a password change or prompt for Azure AD multi-factor authentication. These policies work with existing Azure AD conditional access policies as an extra layer of protection for your organization. Users may never trigger a risky behavior in one of these policies, but your organization is protected if an attempt to compromise your security is made. Azure Active Directory, part of Microsoft Entra, supports applying sensitivity labels published by the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal to Microsoft 365 groups. Sensitivity labels apply to group across services like Outlook, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint. For more information about Microsoft 365 app support, see the Microsoft 365 support for sensitivity labels. Question number 52. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So when using multi-factor authentication, a password is considered something you have 4 options. So let's see the right answer here. So the right answer is no. So multi-factor authentication combines 2 or more independent credentials, what the user knows, such as a password, what the user has, such as a security token, and what the user is by using biometric verification methods. Question number 53. So for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: Windows Hello for Business can use the Microsoft Authenticator app as an authentication method. Windows Hello for Business can use a PIN code as an authentication method. Windows Hello for Business authentication information syncs across all the devices registered by a user. So the first statement is false, the second statement is true, and the third statement is false. So the Microsoft Authenticator app helps you sign into your accounts when you are using two-factor verification. Two-factor verification helps you to use your accounts more securely because password can be forgotten, stolen, or compromised. Two-factor verification uses a second factor like your phone to make it harder for other people to break it into your account. So in Windows 10, Windows Hello for Business replaces passwords with a strong two-factor authentication on device. These authentication consist of a new type of user credentials that is tied to a device and uses a biometric or PIN. Windows Hello credentials are based on certificate or asymmetrical key pair. Windows Hello credentials can be bound to the device and the token that is obtained using the credential is also bound to the device. Question number 54. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. An Azure resource can use a system assigned dash to access Azure services. And you have four options: Azure Active Directory join devices, managed identity, service principal, user identity. So the right answer is managed identity. So managed identities provide an identity for applications to use when connecting to resources that support Azure Active Directory authentication. So here are some of the benefits of using managed identities. You don't need to manage credentials. Credentials aren't even accessible to you. You can use managed identities to authenticate to any resource that supports Azure AD authentication, including your own applications. Question number 55. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. You can use dash in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal to identify devices that are affected by an alert. And you have four options: classifications, incidents, policies, secure score. So the right answer is incidents. So an incident in Microsoft 365 Defender is a collection of correlated alerts and associated data that make up the story of an attack. Microsoft 365 services and apps create alerts when they detect a suspicious or malicious event or activity. Individual alert provide valuable clues about a completed or ongoing attack. However, the attack typically employ various techniques against different types of entities such as devices, users, and mailboxes. The result is multiple alerts for multiple entries in your tenant. Because piecing the individual alerts together to gain insight into an attack can be challenging and time consuming, Microsoft 365 Defender automatically aggregates the alerts and their associated information into an incident. Question number 56. What are two capabilities of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint? Each correct selection presents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. And you have four options. Option A, automated investigation and remediation. Option B, transport encryption. Option C, shadow IT detection. And option D, attack surface reduction. So the right answer is option A and option D, authenticated investigation and remediation and attack surface reduction. So endpoint detection and response capabilities in Defender for Endpoint provide advanced attack detections that are near real time and actionable. Security analysts can prioritize alerts effectively, gain visibility into the full scope of a breach, and take response actions to remediate threats. When a threat is detected, alerts are created in the system for an analyst to investigate. Alerts with the same attack techniques or attributes to the same attacker are aggregated into an entity called an incident. Aggregating alerts in this manner makes it easy for analysts to collectively investigate and respond to threats. Question number 57. Match the Azure networking service to the appropriate description. To answer, drag the appropriate services from the column on the left to its description on the right. Each service may be used once, more than once, and not at all. Each correct match is worth 1 point. So the services are Azure Bastion, Azure Firewall, Network Security Group NSG. So the right answers are: for Azure Firewall provides network address translation services. Azure Bastion provides secure and seamless remote desktop connectivity to Azure virtual machines. Network Security Group NSG provides traffic filtering that can be applied to specific network interface on a virtual network. So Azure Firewall provides service network address translation and destination network address translations. And Azure Bastion provides secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly from the Azure portal over TLS. And you can use an Azure network security group to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources to an Azure virtual network. Question number 58. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So Dash is a cloud native security information and event management and security orchestration automated response solution used to provide a single solution for alert detection, threat visibility, proactive hunting, and threat response. And you have four options: Azure Advisor, Azure Bastion, Azure Monitor, and Azure Sentinel. So the right answer is Azure Sentinel. So Microsoft Azure Sentinel is a scalable, cloud-native security information event management and security orchestration automated response solution. Question number 59. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. So the statements are: Azure Defender can detect vulnerabilities and threats for Azure storage. Cloud Security Posture Management is available for all Azure subscriptions. Azure Security Center can evaluate the security of workloads deployed to Azure or on-premises. So the right answers are all the statements are true. So Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides security alerts and advanced threat protection for virtual machines, SQL databases, containers, web applications, your network, your storage, and more. And Cloud Security Posture Management is available for free for all Azure users. And Azure Security Center is a unified infrastructure security management system that strengthens the security posture of your data centers and provides advanced threat protection across your hybrid workloads in the cloud, whether they are in Azure or not, as well as on premises. Question number 60. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the statements are: an Azure subscription can be associated to multiple Azure Active Directory tenants. You can change the Azure Active Directory tenant to which an Azure subscription is associated. When an Azure subscription expires, the associated Azure Active Directory tenant is deleted automatically. So the right answers are: the first statement is false, the second statement is true, and the last statement is false. So an Azure AD tenant can have multiple subscriptions, but an Azure subscription can only be associated with one Azure AD tenant. And if your subscription expires, you lose access to all other resources associated with the subscription. However, the Azure AD directory remains in Azure. You can associate and manage the directory using a different Azure subscription. So question number 61. Which type of identity is created when you register an application with Active Directory Azure AD? And we have four options: a user account, option B, a user assigned managed identity, option C, a system assigned managed identity, or option D, a service principal. So the right answer here is option D, a service principal. When you register an application through the Azure portal, an application object and service principal are automatically created in your home directory or tenant. So question number 62, select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. You can use Dash in the Microsoft 365 Security Center to view an aggregation of alerts that relate to the same attack. And we have following four options: reports, hunting, attack simulator, incidents. So the right answer here is option D, incidents. An incident in Microsoft 365 Defender is a collection of correlated alerts and associated data that make up the story of an attack. Question number 63. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So each correct selection is worth 1 point. So we have the following statements. Network security groups can deny inbound traffic from the internet. Network security groups can deny outbound traffic to the internet. Network security groups can filter network based on IP address, protocol and port. So the right answers for the statements are, so all of the statements are true. You can use an Azure network security group to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. A network security group contains security rules that allow or deny inbound traffic to or outbound traffic from several types of Azure resources. For each rule, you can specify resource and destination, port and protocol. Question number 64. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Microsoft Intune can be used to manage Android devices. Microsoft Intune can be used to provision Azure subscriptions. Microsoft Intune can be used to manage organization-owned devices and personal devices. So let's see the right selection here. So the first statement is true. So the second statement is false. And the third statement is true. Question number 65. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the statements are, you can create one Azure Bastion per virtual network. Azure Bastion provides secure user connection by using RDP. And Azure Bastion provides a secure connection to an Azure virtual machines by using the Azure portal. So all of the statements are true. So question number 66. What feature in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint provides the first line of defense against cyber threats by reducing the attack surface? And we have four options. Option A, automated remediation. Option B, automated investigation. Option C, advanced hunting. And option D, network protection. So the right answer here is option D, network protection. Network protection helps protect devices from internet-based events. Network protection is an attack surface reduction capability. So question number 67. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. In Microsoft Sentinel, you can automate common tasks by using, and we have four options: deep investigation tools, hunting search and query tools, playbooks, workbooks. So the right answer here is playbooks. Question number 68. Which two types of resources can be protected by using Azure Firewall? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. And we have following five options: Azure Virtual Machines, Azure Active Directory users, Microsoft Exchange online inboxes, and Azure Virtual Network, and option E, Microsoft SharePoint online sites. So the right answer here is option A and option D, Azure Virtual Machines and Azure Virtual Networks. So question number 69. You plan to implement a security strategy and place multiple layers of defense throughout a network infrastructure. Which security methodology does this represents? And we have four options. Threat modeling. Option B, identity as the security perimeter. Option C, defense in depth. And option D, the shared responsibility model. So the right answer here is option C, defense in depth. Defense in depth uses a layered approach to security rather than relying on a single perimeter. A defense in depth strategy uses a series of mechanisms to slow the advance of an attack. Each layer provides protection so that if one layer is breached, a subsequent layer will prevent an attacker getting unauthorized access to data. Question number 70. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can protect Android devices. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can protect Azure virtual machines that run Windows 10. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can protect Microsoft SharePoint online sites and content from viruses. So the first statement is true, the second one is true, and the third statement is false. Question number 71. What can you use to scan email attachments and forward the attachment to recipients only if the attachments are free from malware? And we have four options. Option A, Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Option B, Microsoft Defender antiviruses. Option C, Microsoft Defender for Identity. And option D, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So the right answer here is option A, Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 safeguards your organization against malicious threat posed by email messages, links, and collaboration tools. Question number 72. Which feature provides the extended detection and response capability of Azure Sentinel? We have four options. Option A, integration with the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. Option B, support for threat hunting. Option C, integration with Microsoft 365 Defender. And option D, support for Azure Monitor workbooks. So the right answer here is option C, integration with Microsoft 365 Defender. Microsoft 365 Defender is an XDR solution that automatically collects, correlates, and analyzes signal, threat, and alert data from across your Microsoft 365 environment. Microsoft Sentinel is a cloud-native solution that provides security information and event management and security orchestration, automation, and response capabilities. Together, Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft 365 Defender provide a comprehensive solution to help organizations defend against modern attacks. So question number 73. What can you use to provide threat detection for Azure SQL managed instance? And we have four options: Microsoft Secure Score, Application Security Groups, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Azure Bastion. So the right answer here is option C. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Question number 74. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Microsoft Secure Score in the Microsoft 365 Security Center can provide recommendations for Microsoft Cloud App Security. From the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, you can view how your Microsoft Secure Score compares to the score of my organizations like yours. Microsoft Secure Score in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal gives you points if you address an improvement action by using a third-party application or software. So the right answer here is option yes for the first statement, and the second statement is as well true, and the third statement is true. So question number 75. Which Azure Active Directory feature can you use to restrict Microsoft Intune managed devices from accessing corporate resources? And we have four options: network security groups, Azure AD privileged identity management, conditional access policies, resource logs. So the right answer here is option C, conditional access policies. Question number 76. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So Dash can use conditional access policies to control sessions in real time. And we have the following four options: Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management, Azure Defender, Azure Sentinel, Microsoft Cloud App Security. So the right option here is Microsoft Cloud App Security can use conditional access policies to control sessions in real time. So question number 77. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Azure DDoS protection standard can be used to protect, and we have the following four options: Azure Active Directory applications, Azure Active Directory users, resource groups, virtual networks. So the right answer here is option virtual networks. Question number 78. What should you use in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal to view security trends and track the protection status of identities? And we have four options. Option A, attack simulator. Option B, reports. Option C, hunting. And option D, incidents. So the right answer here is option B, reports. So question number 79. You have a Microsoft 365 E3 subscription. You plan to audit user activity by using the unified audit log and basic audit. For how long will the audit records be retained? And we have the following four options. So the right answer here is option C, 90 days. Question number 80. To which type of resource can Azure Bastion provide secure access? And we have the following four options: Azure Files, Azure SQL Managed Instances, Azure Virtual Machines, Azure App Service. So the right answer here is option C, Azure Virtual Machines. Azure Bastion provides secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly from the Azure portal over TLS. So question number 81. What are three uses of Microsoft Cloud App Security? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. We have following 5 options. Option A, to discover and control the use of shadow IT. Option B, to provide secure connections to Azure virtual machines. Option C, to protect sensitive information hosted anywhere in the cloud. Option D, to provide pass-through authentication to on-premises applications. Option E, to prevent data leaks to non-compliant apps and limit access to regulated data. So the right answer here is option A, C, and E. Question number 82. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. In the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, an incident is a collection of correlated, and we have the following 4 options: alerts, events, vulnerabilities, Microsoft Secure Score Improvement Actions. So the right option here is vulnerabilities. So in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal, an incident is a collection of correlated vulnerabilities. So Microsoft 365 Defender portal is the new home for monitoring and managing security across your identities, data, devices, and apps. You will need to access various portals for certain specialized tasks. It used to monitor and respond to threat activity and strengthen security postures across your identities, email, data, endpoints, and apps with Microsoft 365. Question number 83. You need to connect to an Azure virtual machine by using Azure Bastion. What should you use? And we have 4 options. Option A, PowerShell remoting. Option B, the Azure portal. Option C, the remote desktop connection client. And option D, an SSH client. So the right answer here is option B, the Azure portal. You can create a RDP connection to a Windows VM using Azure Bastion. Question number 84. Which service includes the attack simulation training feature? And we have 4 options. Option A, Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. Option B, Microsoft Defender for identity. Option C, Microsoft Defender for SQL. And option D, Microsoft Defender for Office 365. So the right answer here is option D, Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Attack simulation training in Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2 or Microsoft 365 E5 lets you running cyber attack simulations in your organization. These simulations test your security policies and practices as well as train your employees to increase their awareness and decrease their susceptibility to attacks. Question number 85. Which type of alert can you manage from the Microsoft 365 Defender portal? And we have 4 options: Microsoft Defender for storage, Microsoft Defender for SQL, Microsoft Defender for endpoint, and Microsoft Defender for IoT. So the right answer here is option C, Microsoft Defender for endpoint. The alert queue shows the current set of alerts. You get the alerts queue for incidents and alerts. Alerts on the quick launch of the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. Alerts from different Microsoft security solutions like Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Office 365, and Microsoft 365 Defender appear here. So question number 86. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Microsoft Sentinel Data Connectors supports only Microsoft services. And the second statement, you can use Azure Monitor workbooks to monitor data collected by Microsoft Sentinel. Hunting provides you with the ability to identify security threats before an alert is triggered. So the first statement is false, and the second and the third statement is true. Question number 87. Which two Azure resources can a network security group be associated with? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. And we have 5 options: a virtual network subnet, a network interface, a resource group, a virtual network, an Azure App Service web app. So the right options are A and B, a virtual network subnet and a network interface. Association of network security groups. You can associate a network security group with virtual machines, NICs, and subnets, depending on the deployment model you use. So question number 88. What is a use case for implementing information barrier policies in Microsoft 365? And we have 4 options: to restrict unauthenticated access to Microsoft 365. Option B, to restrict Microsoft Teams chats between certain groups within an organization. Option C, to restrict Microsoft Exchange online email between certain groups within an organization. And option D, to restrict data sharing to external email recipients. So the right answer here is option B, to restrict Microsoft Teams chats between certain groups within an organization. Microsoft Purview Information Barriers is a compliance solution that allows you to restrict two-way communication and collaboration between groups and users in Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive. Often used in highly regulated industries, IB can help to avoid conflicts of interest and safeguard internal information between users and organizational areas. Question number 89. What can you use to deploy Azure resources across multiple subscriptions in a consistent manner? And we have 4 options: Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Azure Blueprints, Microsoft Sentinel, and Azure Policy. So the right answer here is option B, Azure Blueprints. So question number 90. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So each correct selection is worth 1 point. With advanced audit in Microsoft 365, you can identify when email items were accessed. Advanced audit in Microsoft 365 supports the same retention period of audit logs as core auditing. Advanced audit in Microsoft 365 allocates customer dedicated bandwidth for accessing audit data. So the solution is: the first statement is true, the second one is false, and the third statement is true. So question number 91. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. We have the following statements. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection can add users to groups based on the user's risk level. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection can detect whether user credentials were leaked to the public. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection can be used to invoke multi-factor authentication based on a user risk level. So the first statement is false, and the third and the second statement is true. So question number 92. Which Microsoft 365 Compliance Center feature can you use to identify all the documents on a Microsoft SharePoint online site that can contain a specific keyword? And we have the following four options: audit, compliance manager, content search, alerts. So the right answer here is option C, content search. The content search tool in the Security and Compliance Center can be used to quickly find email in Exchange mailboxes, documents in SharePoint sites, and OneDrive locations, and instant messaging conversation in Skype for business. The first step is to starting using the content search tool to choose content locations to search and configure a keyword query to search for specific items. Question number 93. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Dash provides a central location for managing information protection, information governance, and data loss protection policies. And we have the following four options: Azure Defender, the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, the Microsoft Defender Portal, and Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So the right option here is the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. So question number 94. What is the benefit of custom roles in Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure AD? And we have four options. Option A, they allow unlimited access to all administrative features in Entra ID. Option B, they provide the ability to modify the fixed set of permissions in built-in roles. Option C, they offer flexibility in granting access by allowing the selection of specific permissions. Option D, they eliminate the need for a premium P1 or P2 license for Entra ID. So the right answer here is option C. They offer flexibility in granting access by allowing the selection of specific permissions. Question number 95. Which Microsoft security solution lets you find and control the use of shadow IT? And we have the following four options. Option A, Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. Option B, Microsoft Defender for endpoint. Option C, Azure WAF. And option D, Azure Application Gateway. So the right answer here is option A, Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. Microsoft Defender for cloud apps is a cloud access security broker that lets you find uses of shadow IT and control its uses. This is the process of identifying cloud apps and IaaS and PaaS services not authorized by an organization's IT department. This means that without a tool like Microsoft Defender for cloud apps and services are not managed or controlled. Question number 96. Which authentication method allows user to sign in Microsoft Entra ID services, formerly Azure AD, using the same username and password they use for their on-premises Active Directory? And we have the following four options. Option A, Entra ID password hash synchronization. Option B, Entra ID pass-through authentication. Option C, federated authentication. Option D, Entra ID Connect. So the right answer here is option A, Entra ID password hash synchronization. Entra ID password hash synchronization with Entra ID password hash synchronization, users can sign in to Entra ID services using the same username and password they use for their on-premises Active Directory. The password hash is synchronized to Entra ID and the user's password is verified during the sign-in process. Question number 97. What allows you to monitor Microsoft Sentinel data using built-in workbook, templates, and custom workbooks? And we have the following four options. Option A, Azure Monitor Workbooks. Option B, Playbooks based on Azure Logic Apps. Option C, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And option D, Microsoft Defender for App Service. So the right answer here is option A, Azure Monitor Workbooks. You can use Azure Monitor Workbooks to monitor Microsoft Sentinel data using built-in workbook templates and custom workbooks. This is possible because Microsoft Sentinel is integrated with Azure Monitor Workbooks. This includes the ability to create interactive reports through Azure Monitor Workbook. This functionality enables you to gain insights across your data as soon as you connect a data source. Question number 98. You are a Microsoft security admin with an organization. You need to make sure that remote employees can be identified when logging into SharePoint from personal devices. Which of the following security actions should you apply? And we have the following four options: authorization, authentication, principle of least privilege, session management. So the right answer here is option B, authentication. Authentication is the process through which you prove you say you are. Traditionally, the primary method for authentication was verification of a username and password. Other authentication method has come into use, including require multiple authentication methods through multi-factor authentication (MFA) and the use of passwordless authentication methods such as Microsoft Authenticator app and Windows Hello. Question number 99. You are configuring the Azure environment for a credit card company. The environment needs to be compliant with payment card industry data security standard. What should you use to ensure the minimum requirement set for the standard? And we have the following four options: Azure Blueprints, Azure Policy, Communication Compliance, Insider Risk Management. So the right answer here is option A, Azure Blueprints. Azure Blueprints. Azure is a service that lets you define a repeatable set of Azure resources to implement your organization standards, patterns, and requirements. You will use Azure Blueprints in a declarative way to build and deploy new environments with a set of built-in components. So question number 100. Which of these provides recommendations to reduce risk around data protection and regulatory standards? Choose two answers. And we have the following four options. Option A, Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Option B, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Option C, Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. And option D, Microsoft Defender ATP. So the right answer here is option B, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And option C, Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. So Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal is especially designed to provide recommendations and help organizations reduce risk around data protection and regulatory standards. It is a part of the Microsoft Purview solution, which focuses on data governance, cataloging, and compliance. The Purview Compliance Portal assists in managing data privacy, complying with regulatory requirements, and implementing data protection measures. Question number 101. What is the benefit of Azure Key Vault for managing certificates? Option A, encryption for Windows and Linux IaaS virtual machine disk in Azure. Option B, secure storage of tokens in an on-premises server. Option C, organizational responsibility for configuring, patching, and maintaining hardware security modules, HSMs. Option D, provisioning, management, and deployment of public and private SSL TLS certificates for Azure resources. So the right answer here is option D, provisioning, management, and deployment of public and private SSL TLS certificates for Azure resources. So Azure Key Vault facilitates certificate management by allowing you to provision, manage, and deploy public and private secure sockets layers transport layer security certificates for Azure resources. It provides a centralized solution for certificate management, making it easier to handle and secure SSL TLS certificates within your Azure environment. So question number 102, which of the following is a correct statement about network security groups, NSGs, in Azure? Choose three answers. Option A, network security groups filter traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network, VNet. Option B, you can associate 0, 1 or more network security groups to each virtual subnet or virtual machine network interface. Option C, you can associate one network security group with multiple virtual subnets and virtual machines networks interfaces. Option D, network security groups apply to intra-subnet traffic in a virtual network. So the right answer here is option A, C, and option D. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 103, which authentication method allows users to authenticate directly against the on-premises Active Directory without storing passwords in Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure AD? Option A, Entra ID password hash synchronization. Option B, Entra ID pass-through authentication. Option C, federated authentication. And option D, Entra ID connect. So the right answer here is option B, Entra ID pass-through authentication. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 104, what should you use to prevent unauthorized communication with a user, including searching for them, starting a chat session, or sending a meeting invitation in Microsoft Teams? Option A, privileged access management. Option B, data loss prevention. Option C, information barriers. And option D, privileged identity management. So the right answer here is option C, information barriers. You should use information barriers. Information barriers are used to establish two-way restrictions to prevent individuals or groups from communicating. Information barriers support Microsoft Teams, OneDrive for Business, SharePoint Online, as well as other Microsoft products. Information barriers for Microsoft Teams let you restrict several types of activity related to meetings, chats, screen sharing, and file sharing. So question number 105, you need to describe Microsoft privacy principles to management. Which of the following principles applies to individuals' use of and access to their personal data? So the options are transparency, security, control, legal protection. So the right answer here is option C, control. The principle of control is an essential part of Microsoft's approach to privacy. It focuses on putting the customer in control of their data and privacy through easy to use tools and clear choices. Microsoft ensures that individuals have the ability to access, modify, or delete their data at any time. It also emphasizes using data only with the customer's agreement and providing services based on the customer's choice. This principle is enforced by compliance with privacy laws and standards. So question number 106, which signals can conditional access policies take into account when making access decisions in Microsoft Entra ID? Option A, date and time of access attempt. Option B, user's job title. Option C, user created password. And option D, user or group membership. So the right answer here is option D, user or group memberships. Conditional access policies can take into account the user or group membership as a signal when making access decisions. These allows administrators to target policies to specific groups of users or external guest users, providing fine-grained control over access. So question number 107, you are evaluating Microsoft's security policies because of recent leak of sensitive data from within the organization. What should you use to mitigate the further loss of sensitive data? Option A, insider risk management. Option B, information barriers. Option C, privileged access management. And option D, rule-based access control. So the right answer here is option A, insider risk management. Insider risk management can be used to minimize internal risks through the detection, investigation, and mitigation of intentional and unintentional breaches of your organization's insider policies. It can help you to minimize or avoid risks of sensitive data leaks, intellectual property theft, insider trading, and fraud. So the question number 108, which of the following protects your organization from malicious threats presented in email messages, web links, and collaboration tools? Option A, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Option B, Microsoft Defender for Identity. Option C, Microsoft Defender for Office 365. And option D, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So the right answer here is option C. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 is a seamless integration into your Office 365 subscription that provides protection against threats that arrive in emails, links, attachment, or collaboration tools like SharePoint, Teams, and Outlook. With real-time views of threats and tools like Threat Explorer, you can threat hunt and stay ahead of potential threats. So question number 109, what is Microsoft Security Information Event Management and Security Orchestration Automated Response Security Solution? And the options are Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and Microsoft 365 Defender. So the right answer here is option B, Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel is Microsoft SIM security solution. Microsoft Sentinel collects data from on-premises and multiple clouds for all users, devices, applications, and infrastructure, detects previously uncovered threats and minimizes false positives, investigates threats and hunts suspicious activities at scale, responds to incidents, and built-in orchestration and security task automation. So question number 110, you're working with customers' data using Microsoft Purview. Which of the following Which of these allow you to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to categorize the data? Option A, extract data match classification. Option B, custom sensitive information types. Option C, sensitive information types. Option D, trainable classifiers. So the right answer here is option D, trainable classifiers. Trainable classifiers in Microsoft Purview utilize artificial intelligence and machine learning to intelligently classify data unique to an organization. This method focuses on training and the classifiers to identify items based on their content rather than specific patterns. Trainable classifiers can be pre-trained classifiers provided by Microsoft or custom classifiers created and trained by organizations. These classifiers are particularly useful for classifying organization-specific data, such as specific types of contracts, invoices, or customer records. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 111. Which of these provides recommendations to reduce risk around data protection and regulatory standards? Option A, Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Option B, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Option C, Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. And option D, Microsoft Defender ATP. So the right answer here is option B, and option C. The Microsoft Purview compliance portal is specially designed to provide recommendations and help organizations reduce risk, data protection, and regulatory standards. It is a part of the Microsoft Purview solution, which focuses on data governance, cataloging, and compliance. The Purview compliance portal assists in managing data privacy, complying with regulatory requirements, and implementing data protection measures. Question number 112. Which of these tools or concepts allow you to make choices about how and why your Microsoft data is collected and used? Option A, Compliance Manager. Option B, Privacy Principles of Microsoft. Option C, Shared Responsibility Model. And option D, Zero Trust Methodology. So the right answer here is option B, Privacy Principles of Microsoft. The privacy principles of Microsoft are about making meaningful choices for how and why data is collected and used. They ensure that you have the information you need to make the right choices for your organization. Microsoft privacy principles include information about where your data is located and how Microsoft collects and protects data. So question number 113. You are an Azure security administrator. You have been asked to identify a tool that will continuously analyze and security status of your Azure resources for network security best practices. What would you recommend? Option A, Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. Option B, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Option C, Azure Monitor. And option D, Regulatory Compliance. So the right answer here is option B, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. A network map is provided with Microsoft Defender for Cloud as a way to continuously monitor your network security status, including network topology, node connections, and node configurations. So question number 114. You are a Microsoft admin for a company. You need to implement an effective data loss prevention policy structure. Before you begin planning DLP policies, you need to describe to management the steps you have taken to ensure your DLP policies will be effective. Which steps would you describe? The options are option A, encrypt all sensitive data. Option B, describe, discover, and classify sensitive data. Option C, plan the DLP implementation. Option D, design and create DLP policies. So the right answer here is option B, describe, discover, and classify sensitive data. Data loss prevention helps you prevent an unintentional or accidental sharing of sensitive information. DLP examines email messages and files for sensitive information like credit card numbers. Using DLP, you can detect sensitive information and take actions such as log the event for audit purposes, display a warning to the end user who is sending the email or sharing the file, actively block email or file sharing from taking place. Question number 115. Which of these describes the concept of data privacy? Option A, governing the physical locations where data can be stored and how and when it can be transferred, processed, or accessed internationally. Option B, providing notice and being transparent about the collection, processing, use, and sharing of personal data are fundamental principles of privacy laws and regulations. Option C, understanding that data is subject to the laws and regulations of the country, region in which it's physically collected, held, or processed. Option D, collecting data in one location, stored in it in another, and processing it in still another location. So the right answer here is option B. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 116. Which authentication method provides highly available cloud authentication, allowing on-premises users to authenticate with Microsoft Entra ID even if the on-premises Active Directory goes down? Option A, Entra ID password hash synchronization. Option B, intra-ID pass-through authentication. Option C, federated authentication. And option D, intra-ID connect. So the right answer here is option A, intra-ID password hash synchronization. Password hash synchronization provides highly available cloud authentication. Even if the on-premises Active Directory goes down, on-premises users can still authenticate with Entra ID to access cloud-based applications. So question number 117, you want to find out how Microsoft Cloud Services protect your data and how you can manage cloud data security and compliance for your organization. What should you use? Option A, Azure Security Center. Option B, Microsoft Compliance Manager. Option C, Service Trust Portal. And option D, Microsoft Intune. So the right answer here is option C, Service Trust Portal. Service Trust Portal is the primary platform that offers a variety of content, tools, and resources related to Microsoft Cloud Services data protection, cloud data security, and compliance management. It provides access to audit reports, compliance related information, Microsoft authored white papers, and other resources to help organizations understand how Microsoft safeguards data and manages cloud data security and compliance. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 118. You plan to connect an application to Azure resources that support Entra ID authentication. You want to avoid managing any credentials or incur extra cost. Which identity type should you choose for the application? And the options are managed identity, user assigned identity, service principal, shared access signature. So the right answer here is option A, managed identity. Managed identity is a feature in Azure that provides an automatically managed identity for Azure resources. With managed identity, the application can authenticate with Azure resources that support Microsoft Entra ID authentication without needing to manage any credentials. It eliminates the need for storing and managing secrets or passwords within the application's code or configuration. Managed identity is a no-cost option, meaning there are no additional charges for using this feature. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 119. What is the main purpose of Azure AD B2B collaboration? Option A, managing customer identities. Option B, sharing apps and resources with external users. Option C, handling authentication for consumer facing apps. Option D, enabling self-service sign-up for employees. So the right answer here is option B, sharing apps and resources with external users. Azure AD B2B collaboration allows organizations to share their applications and services with guest users from other organizations while maintaining control over their own data. It enables collaboration and access control for external users. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 120. What should you use to encrypt Windows and Linux IaaS virtual machine disks in Azure? Option A, transparent data encryption. Option B, Azure disk encryption. And option C, Azure storage service encryption. And option D, always encrypted. So the right answer here is option B. Azure Storage Service Encryption is used to automatically encrypt data at rest in Azure Blob Storage and Azure File Shares. It ensures that the data is encrypted before it is stored and automatically decrypts it when retrieved. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 121. Which of these ensures that the data has not been tampered with in transit? So the options are hashing, encryption, authentication, authorization. So the right answer here is option A, hashing. Hashing is a security operation that can use mathematically functions or algorithms to map source data to a fixed size value. You can use it, for example, to generate a hash for your file, Recipients of that file can then use the same hashing algorithm to compare it with the original hash value as a proof that the file was not tampered with while in transit. So question number 122, which statement describes data sovereignty? Option A, the physical or geographic location of an organization's data or information. Option B, providing notice and being transparent about the collection, processing, use, and sharing of personal data are fundamental principles of privacy laws and regulations. Option C, data, including personal data, is subjected to the laws and regulations of the country, region in which it is physically collected, held, or processed. Option D, trust no one, verify everything. So the right answer here is option C. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 123, which enhanced security feature of Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides a unified view of security across on-premises and cloud workloads? Option A, comprehensive endpoint detection and response. Option B, vulnerability scanning for virtual machines. Option C, multi-cloud security, and option D, hybrid security. So the right answer here is option D, hybrid security. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 124, which of these is true of conditional access policies in Microsoft Entra ID? Option A, if they are configured to apply all users, they will apply to Azure AD B2B collaboration guest users. Option B, they let you apply time-sensitive access permissions that can be configured to automatically expire. Option C, they require access to Azure Identity Protection in order to evaluate sign-in risk and user risk. Option D, if they are configured within Azure Sentinel, you can evaluate sign-in risk and user risk. So the right answer here is option A and option C. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 125, you are a Microsoft 365 security admin. You need to apply sensitivity labels to your organization's data. Which of these actions can you take when applying sensitivity labels? Option A, apply multiple sensitivity labels to emails and documents. Option B, specify that a default label is to be applied to all items in a container through a label policy. Option C, include multiple sensitivity labels in the same label policy. Option D, classify content without adding protection settings. So the right answer here is option B, C, and option D. Question number 126. Which feature of Microsoft Entra ID can you use to manage user access throughout the user's organizational life? And the options are identity lifecycle, access lifecycle, authentication, conditional access policy. So the right answer here is option B, access lifecycle. Access lifecycle is managing access throughout the user's organizational life. Users require different access levels from the point at which they join an organization to when they leave it. At various stages in between, they will need access rights to different resources depending on their role and responsibilities. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 127. What is the basis of your compliance score in Compliance Manager? Option A, completed Microsoft actions only. Option B, your current Microsoft Secure score. Option C, the default Microsoft 365 data protection baseline assessment. Option D, automated testing, monitored improvements actions only. So the right answer here is option C, the default Microsoft 365 data protection baseline assessments. Your initial compliance manager compliance score is based on the Microsoft 365 data protection baseline. This is a set of controls that include regulations and standards for data protection and data governance. You can view an overall compliance score based on these data protection standards. So question number 128, what statement best describes the concept of data residency? Option A, trust no one, verify everything. Option B, regulations govern the physical locations where data can be stored and how and when it can be transferred, processed, and accessed internationally. Option C, the collection, processing, usage, and sharing of personal data should be a transparent process and are fundamental principles of privacy laws and regulations. Option D, data, particularly personal data, is subject to the laws and regulations of the country region in which it is physically collected, held, or processed. So the right answer here is option B. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 129, which enhanced security feature of Microsoft Defender for Cloud reduces exposure to brute force and other network attacks by controlling access to management ports on Azure VMs? Option A, threat protection alerts. Option B, compliance tracking. Option C, adaptive application controls. And option D, hybrid security. So the right answer here is option C, adaptive application controls. Adaptive application controls are an intelligent and automated solution for defining a allow list of known safe applications for your machines. Let's jump on to the next question. Question number 130. Which category in the Service Trust portal provides certifications, regulations, and standards related to Microsoft Cloud Services? Option A, certifications, regulations, and standards. Option B, reports, white papers, and artifacts. Option C, industry and regional resources. Option D, resources for your organization. So the right answer here is option A, certifications, regulations, and standards. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 131. Which feature of Microsoft Entra ID helps reduce the risk of users setting weak passwords? The options are multi-factor authentication, password protection, global banned password list, custom banned password list. So the right answer here is option B, password protection. Entra ID's password protection is a feature that helps reduce the risk of users setting weak passwords by detecting and blocking known weak passwords and then variants. It enforces the use of strong passwords during password change or reset process. So question number 132. Which tool provides a secure score by continually accessing your organization's Azure, hybrid, and multi-cloud resources? Option A, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Option B, Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. Option C, Microsoft Sentinel. And option D, Cloud Security Posture Management. So the right answer here is option A, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides a secure score by continually accessing your organization's Azure, hybrid, and multi-cloud resources. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 133. Which of these describes Microsoft Entra ID? Option A, it is a set of directory services that connect users with the on-premises network resources. Option B, it provides a special class of identity to manage external identities. Option C, it supports software as a service apps natively. Option D, it provides real-time monitoring and alerting for security incidents in the Azure cloud environment. So the right answer here is option A. Microsoft Entra ID is a set of directory services that connect users with on-premises network resources. AD connects consists of different directory services such as Active Directory Domain Services, Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services, Active Directory Certificate Services, and others. It was designed for on-premises domain-based networks, and it contains information about users and devices, their credentials, and defined access to the relevant network resources. So question number 134. Your organization has multiple Azure virtual machines deployed in Azure virtual networks. You want to enhance the security of these VMs and reduce exposure to attacks while providing easy access to connect to the VMs when needed. A team member needs to access one of the VMs for maintenance purposes. What should you do? Option A, use just-in-time access. Option B, enable multi-factor authentication for administrators. Option C, disable the administrator user account and only enable them when needed with PowerShell. Option D, block outbound traffic from the VMs temporarily until maintenance is complete. So the right answer here is option A, use just-in-time access. Just-in-time access allows lockdown of the inbound traffic in your VMs, reducing exposure to attacks while providing easy access to connect to VM when needed. Question number 135. Which access control decisions can be made by conditional access policies? Option A, grant access to Microsoft Entra ID Admin Center. Option B, block access. Option C, grant access. Or option D, force a password change. So the right answer here is option B, C, and D. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 136. You're planning your organization security management rules and guidelines for its Azure resources. What should you use? And the options are Azure Policy, Role-Based Access Control, Azure Monitor, Network Security Group. So the right answer here is option A, Azure Policy. So Azure Policy is a service that allows users to define and enforce policies for resource consistency, compliance, security, cost, and management in Azure. It enables organizations to establish rules and guidelines for their Azure resources. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 137. You are a Microsoft 365 security admin. You want to see a historical view of what is being done with content labels, such as labels being applied or changed. What should you use? Options are Content Explorer, Compliance Score, Activity Explorer, Azure Secure Score. So the right answer here is option C, Activity Explorer. So let's jump on to the next question. So question number 138. What category of cards in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal provides insights into how cloud apps are being used in your organization? Options are identities, data, devices, apps. So the right answer here is option D, apps. The apps category in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal provides insights into how cloud apps are being used in your organization. It helps you understand and monitor the usage of various cloud applications within your organization's environment. Question number 139. What is the lowest cost edition of Microsoft Entra ID needed to support multi-factor authentication, conditional access, and privileged identity management? The options are Office 365 apps, Entra ID free, Entra ID Premium P1, Entra ID Premium P2. So the right answer here is option D, Entra ID Premium P2. So Entra ID Premium P2 is required to support PIM, and therefore Entra ID Premium P2 would be required in this scenario. Entra ID Premium P2 also supports MFA and conditional access. So let's jump on to the next question. Question number 140. Which encryption method is used to protect Azure SQL database and Azure Data Warehouse against malicious activities? Option A, transparent data encryption. Option B, Azure Disk Encryption. Option C, Azure Storage Service Encryption. And option D, Always Encrypted. So the right answer here is option A, Transparent Data Encryption. So transparent data encryption is used to protect Azure SQL database and Azure Data Warehouse against malicious activity. It performs real-time encryption and decryption of the database, associated backups and transaction log files at rest without requiring changes to the application. Which Microsoft 365 feature can you use to restrict users from sending email messages that contains list of customers and their associated credit card numbers? And you have the following four options: retention policies, data loss prevention policies, conditional access policies, information barrier. So the right answer here is option B, data loss prevention policies. Select the answers that correctly completes the sentence. So we have the following four options. Can be used to provide Microsoft support engineers with access to an organization's data stored in Microsoft Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive for Business. So the right option here is customer lockbox. In a core e-discovery workflow, what should you do before you can search for content? And the options are create an e-discovery hold, run express analysis, configure attorney client privilege detection, export and download results. So the right answer here is option A, create an e-discovery hold. Which Microsoft portal provides information about how Microsoft manages privacy, compliance, and security? And the options are Microsoft Service Trust Portal, Compliance Manager, Microsoft 365 Compliance Center, Microsoft Support. So the right answer here is option A, Microsoft Service Trust Portal. What can you protect by using the information protection solution in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center? And the options are computers from zero-day exploits, option B, users from phishing attempts, option C, files from malware and viruses, and option D, sensitive data from being exposed to unauthorized users. So the right answer here is option D, sensitive data from being exposed to unauthorized users. What can you specify in Microsoft 365 sensitivity labels? And option A, how long files must be preserved? Option B, when to archive an email message? Option C, which watermark to add to files? And option D, where to store files. So the right option here is option C, which watermark to add to files. So let's jump on to the next question. So for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So each correct solution is worth 1 point. So you can use advanced audit in Microsoft 365 to view billing details. And the second statement is you can use advanced audit in Microsoft 365 to view the contents of an email message. And the third statement is you can use advanced audit in Microsoft 365 to identify when a user uses the search bar in Outlook on the web to search for items in a mailbox. So the right answer here is, so the first two statements are false and the third statement is true. So for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the statements are: you can add a resource log to an Azure subscription. You can add only one resource log to an Azure resource. You can delete a resource group containing resources that have resource logs. So the right options are: the first statement is true, the second one is false, and the third statement is true. So let's jump on to the next question. So for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the following statements are: users can only apply sensitivity labels manually. Multiple sensitivity labels can be applied to the same file. And the third statement is: a sensitivity label can apply a watermark to a Microsoft Word document. So the right options are: the first statement is true, the second one is false, and the third statement is true. So which two tasks can you implement by using data loss prevention policies in Microsoft 365? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Option A, display policy tips to users who are about to violate your organization's policies. Enable disk encryption on endpoints. Option C, protect documents in Microsoft OneDrive that contains sensitivity information. And option D, apply security baselines to devices. So the right answer here is option A and option C. Select the answers that correctly completes the sentence. So you have the following four options. Compliance manager assesses compliance data for an organization. So the right option to complete the sentence is continually. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the statements are: sensitivity labels can be used to encrypt documents. Sensitivity labels can add headers and footers to documents. Sensitivity labels can apply watermarks to emails. So the right options here are, so all the three statements are true. Question number 153. You have an Azure subscription that contains multiple resources. You need to access, compliance, and enforce standards for the existing resources. What should you use? And the options are Azure Blueprints, the Anomaly Detector Service, Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Policy. So the right answer here is option D, Azure Policy. Question number 154. With Microsoft Defender for Cloud metric displays the overall security health of an Azure subscription. And the options are secure score, resource health, completed controls, the status of recommendations. So the right answer here is option A, secure score. Question number 155. What is the maximum number of resources that Azure DDoS protection standard can protect without additional costs? The options are 50, 100, 500, and 1000. So the right answer here is option B, 100. Question number 156. What are two reasons to deploy multiple virtual networks instead of using just one virtual network? Each correct answer represents a complete solution. And the options are to meet governance policies, to connect multiple types of resources, to separate the resources for budgeting, to isolate the resources. So the right answer here is option A and option D. Question number 157. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. Microsoft Sentinel provides quick insights into data by using, and we have the following four options. So the right answer here is Azure Monitor Workbook Templates. So the next question, Microsoft 365 Endpoint Data Loss Prevention can be used on which operating systems? And you have the following four options. So the right option here is option A, Windows 10 and iOS only. So the next question, for each of the following statements, select yes if the statements are true, otherwise select no. So the statements are Microsoft Defender for Cloud can detect vulnerabilities and threats for Azure storage. Cloud security posture management is available for all Azure subscriptions. Microsoft Defender for Cloud can evaluate the security of workloads deployed to Azure or on premises. So the right options are all the three statements are true. So the next question, select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. So you have the following four options. Is a cloud service for storing application secrets. So the right option here is Azure Key Vault. Question number 161. Select the answer that correctly completes the sentence. You have the following four options. Provides cloud workload protection for Azure and hybrid cloud resources. So the right option here is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So which security feature is available in the free mode of Microsoft Defender for Cloud? The options are threat protection alerts, just-in-time VM access to Azure virtual machines, vulnerability scanning of virtual machines, secure score. So the right option here is option D, secure score. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. So the statements are Microsoft Sentinel Data Connector supports only Microsoft services. You can use Azure Monitor workbooks to monitor data collected by Microsoft Sentinel. Hunting provides you with the ability of identity, security, threats before an alert is triggered. So the right options are, so the first statement is false and the second and third statement are true. So for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Microsoft Secure Score in the Microsoft 365 Security Center can provide a recommendation for Microsoft Cloud App Security. For the Microsoft 365 Security Center, you can view how your Microsoft Secure Score compares to the score of organization like yours. Microsoft Secure Score in the Microsoft 365 Security Center gives you points if you address the improvement action by using a third-party application or software. So the right options are all the three statements are true. Which Azure Active Directory feature can you use to restrict Microsoft Intune managed devices for accessing corporate resources? The options are network security groups, Azure AD privileged identity management, conditional access policies, resource logs. So the right answer here is option C, conditional access policies. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Software tokens are an example of passwordless authentication. Windows Hello is an example of passwordless authentication. FIDO2 security keys are an example of passwordless authentication. So the right options are the first statement is false and the second and third statement is true. Which Azure Active Directory feature can you use to evaluate group membership and automatically remove users that no longer require membership in a group? And the options are access reviews, managed identities, conditional access policies, Azure AD identity protection. So the right answer here is option A, access reviews. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. You can create a hybrid identity in an on-premises Active Directory that syncs to Azure AD. User accounts created in Azure AD sync automatically to an on-premises Active Directory. When using a hybrid model, authentication can either be done by Azure AD or by another identity provider. So the right options are first and the third statement are true and the second statement is false. Which three authentication methods can Azure AD users use to reset their passwords? The options are mobile app notification, text message to a phone, security questions, certificate, picture password. So the right answer here is option A, B, and option C. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Azure AD B2C enables external users to sign in by using their preferred social and enterprise account identities. External Azure AD B2C users are managed in the same directory as users in the Azure AD organization. Custom branding can be applied to Azure AD B2C authentication. So the right options are: the first statement is true, the second one is false, and the third statement is true. What is a function of conditional access session controls? And the options are enforcing device compliance, enforcing client app compliance, enable limited experiences such as blocking download of sensitive information, prompting multi-factor authentication. So the right option here is option C. Enable limited experiences such as blocking download of sensitive information. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Azure AD Identity Protection can add users to groups based on the user's risk level. Azure AD Identity Protection can detect whether user credentials were leaked to the public. Azure AD Identity Protection can be used to invoke multi-factor authentication based on a user's risk level. So the right options are: the first statement is false, and the second and third statements are true. What can you use to ensure that all the users in a specific group must use multi-factor authentication to sign into Azure Active Directory? Azure policy, a communication compliance policy, a conditional access policy, a user risk policy. So the right answer here is option C, a conditional access policy. Which pillar of identity relates to tracking the resources accessed by a user? And the options are authorization, auditing, administration, authentication. So the right answer here is option B, auditing. What can be created in Active Directory domain services? And the options are line of business applications that require modern authentication, computer accounts, software as a service applications that require modern authentication, mobile devices. So the right answer here is option B, computer accounts. You are evaluating the compliance score in Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. Match the compliance score action subcategories to the appropriate actions. To answer, drag the appropriate action subcategory from the column on the left to its action on the right. Each action subcategory may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Action subcategories we have corrective, detective, preventative. Let's see the right statements for them. The corrective we have make configuration changes in response to a security incident. Detective we have perform a system access audit. Preventative we have encrypt data at rest. Which compliance feature should you use to identify documents that are employee resumes? The options are pre-trained classifiers, Activity Explorer, e-discovery, Content Explorer. So the right answer here is option A, pre-trained classifiers. Question number 178. What are customers responsible for when evaluating security in a software as a service cloud services model? And the options are network controls, operating systems, applications, accounts, and identities. So the right answer here is option C, applications. Question number 179. What should you create to search and export content preserved in an e-discovery hold? And the options are Azure Files, a Microsoft SharePoint online site, a Microsoft Exchange online public folder, a case. So the right answer here is option D, a case. Question number 180. Which Microsoft Purview data classification type supports the use of regular expressions? And the options are fingerprint classifier, trainable classifier, sensitivity information types, exact data match. So the right answer here is option C, sensitive information types. Question number 181. What can you use to provision Azure resources across multiple subscriptions in a consistent manner? The options are Azure Defender, Azure Blueprints, Azure Sentinel, Azure Policy. So the right answer here is option B, Azure Blueprints. Question number 182. When you enable Azure AD multi-factor authentication, how many factors are required for authentication? And you have the following four options. So the right option here is option D, 2. Question number 183. You need to connect to an Azure virtual machine by using Azure Bastion. What should you use? We have the following four options: an SSH client, PowerShell remoting, the remote desktop connection client, the Azure portal. So the right answer here is option C, the remote desktop connection client. Question number 184. What is the characteristic